Hello again in this another exciting tutorial with me, Romy Fauzi. In this episode, I think this is the fifth episode. I'm going to show you how to create the enemy. So let's continue where we left off, and I've hide the coin object here. As you can see, I've disabled it in the group. I put it all of the coins inside a empty game object, and then I disabled them all together. And then I have created the enemy using the Playmaker. So if you can see here, I've created a enemy using a capsule collider, and we can change this to another object later. And I have also created the Playmaker actions for it. So I have created two FSM Playmaker FSM on the enemy. The first one is the enemy AI, and the second one is the enemy die. And for the enemy die, I have set this to deactivated on start, so this FSM doesn't get executed on start. It gets disabled, and when we need it, we are going to activate this later. So let's go back, go to the enemy AI. So basically, inside this enemy AI, I have two variable. The first one is local position, which is the target position we are using later for moving. And this is the movement. So this is basically the direction of the movement, the offset we need to create this local pose. And I'm going to show you with this two variable we can create a movement like this. So basically what we are going to do is create a movement, the enemy movement like this. So it's going to move 6 units to the right, and then after that it's going back to 6 units to the left, and so, and the movement we are going to be looping continuously. And as you can see here, we can jump, and if we stomp on the enemy, it will die like that. But if you somehow collide it with the enemy but without stomping, then the player is going to die. So okay, sorry. Yeah, let's try this. Okay, there you go. I have just simply destroyed the player upon collision. So here, using the Playmaker, I've created a under the enemy AI. The first state is basically we are getting the current position of the player, and I stored this to a local pose vector. And this is only happened one time, so it only happened on the start. And then I've added the vector that we have retrieved from our enemy position. Then we add the movement value to it, so the x-axis gets offsetted by 6 units. And then after this actions finish running, we go to the move state, and under the move state it will stay it will stay in this action, which is move towards, until the player reach the target position, which is the local pose, with a threshold of finish distance as 0.05. Once it arrives to this destination here, it will go to the finish, and then we are going to flip the direction by multiply the movement with -1. So if it's positive, then it will going to be a negative value here on the x-axis, and so it's going to be -6. And if it's -6, it will turn back to a positive value, which is 6. And after we multiply it with the -1, we go back to the set target position, and we set the new target position here by offsetting with the movement vector, and then we start to move again. Okay, so now with this AI set, we are able to create a enemy that are moving back and forth. And under the enemy die, we only have one state, and basically we are just setting the properties of the rigid body. So we are setting the properties of the enemy rigid body. We are disabling the kinematic, and then we are enabling the use gravity option, and then we are disable the capsule collider component, and then we are setting a velocity only for 1 frame on the y-axis with a value of 3, so it will jump for a while and then goes down and die. Okay, so but this action is disabled actually. So if we go to the player here, I've created a new FSM, which I call this collide with enemy. So basically in this FSM, I wait for collision, but inside this wait for collision state, I'm getting the velocity of the y velocity every frame. So we are getting the y velocity, and we are stored that velocity inside this float called y speed, and we are executing this action every frame. But once we collide it with an object that has a tag of enemy, we go to this collided state, and inside this collided state, I'm comparing the y speed value that we retrieved earlier here in the first state, and if it's less than a very small negative amount, which means we are falling, because if we are falling, then the y velocity should be in a negative value, and if it's less than this value here, we are going to kill the enemy. This means we are stomping the enemy, and if it's equal or greater than, then we are not jumping, we are not stomping the enemy, then the player should die. So if the player die, then we are destroying the object itself. But if we killing the enemy, then we are simply setting the FSM from the enemy object, and the FSM name is enemy die. And where did I get this enemy object? So basically I create a game object variable here, and then I put it whenever we collide it with an object that has a tag enemy, and I store the game object that we have collided, and then we can use that game object that information that lies on this variable here, and we can check if the variable has the FSM name of enemy die, and if it has it, then we can enable this. So basically what happened with this state is we are checking the enemy, and here as you can see I have named this enemy die, so this name should be this I'm sorry, the name here on the FSM name should be the same with the one that we put it on our enemy, and basically we are activating this. So once it was disabled, then it gets activated upon collision. So that way we can collide with we can kill the enemy like this. Yep. Okay, so now let's create the C# version of it. I'm going to copy the enemy, and then I'm going to drag this to a C# object, and let's disable the Playmaker object, and let's disable the C# object here, and I'm going to rename this to enemy C#, and I'm going to delete all of the FSM, and let's create a new script. So here I'm going to create a new script, and I'm going to name this enemy script, and then let's open the script. Okay, once we open the script, we are going to create a public vector tree, and let's name this movement, and we also need one that is private, and I'm going to name this target position, and I'm going to save this. And since we are using a rigid body, then I'm going to grab the rigid body reference. So I'm going to create a new rigid body variable, and I'm going to name this RB, and under the start method, I'm going to grab the position, grab the rigid body by using get component rigid body, and then I'm going to create a new method which is set target position. And what this method do, actually it is doing like the state under our enemy AI. We are setting the target position. So with target position, I'm going to use the target position variable, and then I'm going to store the value from our position, and then we are adding the movement vector. Okay, so now since we have a rigid body, so I'm going to alter the position of our rigid body, not our transform position. So let's change this update to a fixed update, and I'm going to change this update to a fixed update. And then let's open the script. Okay, so now since we have a rigid body, so I'm going to alter the position of our rigid body, not our transform position. So let's change this update to a fixed update. And then let's open the script. since every code related with the rigid body or related with the physics system would be best to put inside a fixed update instead of update. So, and then let's create a private boolean alive and then set this to true. So whenever the the enemy is alive, then we are going to allow the enemy to move. So we are going to check if it's alive, then execute all of the code inside this bracket here. Now we are going to modify the movement. So I'm going to use the rb.position, just like transform.position, and here I'm going to use a factor 3 dot move towards. So in C# we also have move towards like the one in Playmaker, and the current position is the RB position, and the target is the target position that we have created here. And now we can create a new float variable which is going to be speed, and I'm going to set the value of 1, and we can change this later in inspector to make it faster or slower, and put this speed variable inside here, and we need to multiply this by time dot fix delta time, not delta time, because time dot delta time we need to use this one since this is a fixed update. If you are using a void update, then you should using time dot delta time. Basically this is time between frames, but with a time dot fixed delta time, this is a time between fixed update interval. I think it's around 0.05. I think it's a fixed value. I'm not sure what the value is. And now we are going to check its distance. So if the target position minus our current position dot magnitude, so this is the distance, the length of our vector here after the subtraction, is smaller than, let's say, 0.5, a very small value here. So it means we are already almost arriving to our target position here. Then we are going to flip the direction. So to flip the direction, we just need to multiply the movement. So basically we are setting the previous value, and then we are multiplying by -1 here. So if the previous value is 600, which is represent the XYZ axis, it will be -600, and if it's -600, then it will go back to 600. So it will change our direction. And after we flip the movement here vector, then we are going to call this set target position method. And then here on start, I'm going to call this also once. So we set this once in the start method, and then I'm going to create a void, but this will be a public method. So I'm going to name this public die. So this is basically for the enemy for the enemy to die. And since we already have our rigid body component, I'm going to modify it here. So we are going to set the schematic to false, just like the one in Playmaker, and then we are going to set the use gravity to true. And another thing, we are going to grab the component here, the collider, directly, and then we are simply going to disable the collider. So the enabled property we are setting to false, so it will be disabled. Okay, so and then we can also add a velocity, a slight velocity here to the upward direction. So we can just use the constant that Unity have provided for us, which is factor 3 dot up, and This is basically a shorthand writing for vector 0, 1, 0. So we are moving on the y-axis, and then we can multiply this by 3, by float of 3, so it will give a jump effect before die. Okay, and I'm going to add also a destroy, and we are going to destroy this game object, the enemy, but we are going to set an interval here, the optional amount of time to delay before destroying. So let's destroy this after 2 seconds. I think 2 seconds would be safe. Okay, then we can save this. And why do we mark this method public? Because we are going to call this method from our player movement script. So now on our player movement script, we need to create a new void on collision. So to make this easier, I'm going to copy this method here, and then I'm going to paste this here, and then let's close this statement here, and let's fix this by, and then I'm going to change this to collision enter, and if the object, the game object tag is enemy, then we are going to check our velocity first. So now we need to use this float, the y speed variable here, which is storing our velocity y. But since this is a local variable, we do not have access to this variable. So we need to declare the variable here, private float y speed, and then I'm going to remove this type here and just use this here, y speed equal. So now we can access the y speed here. Okay, so now we just need to check if the y speed is less than, let's say, less than 0, which is minus value, then kill the enemy, because we are stomping it. Okay, and then else we kill ourselves. So just use destroy first, and later we can create a dying effect, a better dying effect, but for the purpose of this script, we can use the destroy. And here we can grab the script from our enemy object, which is the collided game object, and then get the component and the enemy script, and then we can execute the die function here. And this is why I marked the die method public. If we don't use the scope modifier here, we just type it right away, void die, we will not have access to it here. So that's why I marked this public. Okay, so yep, let's see if this working. Okay, let's try this in Unity. So make sure that your enemy object here has a rigid body, and it sets to schematic, and it sets the constraint to the value here. Yeah, make sure the schematic is checked, and let's put the enemy script to the enemy, and I'm going to set the value to the same value like our enemy here, which is 6 on the y-axis, and this will be the distance the enemy moving before it goes back. So, and this will be the speed of the movement. So let's save this and let's see if it's working or not. Okay, now as you can see here, the enemy is moving 6 units and then it goes back. And if you want to make the enemy faster, you can increase the speed value here. And let's see this. There you go, we have a faster enemy movement. And another thing, make sure that the enemy has a tag of enemy. So if you don't have it, you can add tag and then create a new tag, call it enemy. And we need those tags because we are using the tag enemy inside our player movement whenever we collided with the enemy. Okay, so let's save the scene and let's try this. So now we are using the C# object. As you can see, the Playmaker object is disabled, and let's move the character and let's try to collide with the enemy first, and then oh, okay, there's something wrong here. Let's check the script. If the Y speed is yep, we don't use the Y speed anymore. Okay, so yeah, if Y speed is less than 0. Okay, let's make this a negative value, a very small negative value, and let's try this again. Okay, as you can see, we are dying, and now let's jump to the enemy here. Let's stomp this. There you go. Let's try this again just to make sure that our script working correctly under all circumstances. Yeah. So as you can see, if we stomp the enemy will bounce, shock, and then dies to the ground. So that's how you can create the enemy script with a C#, and I've already explained also in Playmaker, so you can see the resemblance and the different methods between it, and you can choose whichever the best method that you found easier for you. But don't afraid to try scripting on your own, and if there is an error, Unity will tell on the console about it, so don't be afraid. And if you have any questions, just leave in the comment section below. I hope you like these episodes, and if you like watching these tutorials, please hit that subscribe button. I'll see you in the next episode. Thanks for watching. Bye.